I don't know what height I am. Keeps changing at every doctor's appointment. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this very special day. My name is Elisa Kaplan, and along with my co-partner in crime, Marcy Schoenfeld over there, we're the Vice Presidents for Education and Programming for the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. And thank you very much for those people who joined today. We're always looking for members. Marcy and I are also members of the Jewish Arts and Film Committee, and we're very proud to have this joint program. I think this is our third or fourth year doing this together with Nancy, and it's just always a beautiful day and a very meaningful program. This November is a very busy month. If you are a veteran of the United States military or the military of any country, if you were in war or just in or I don't want to say just, or in service when there wasn't a war, I'd like you to please stand. Anyone who goes into the military service, it's just that, service. And it's not, and even if you go willingly and excited, there are a lot of sacrifices. And so we thank you for your service. Of course, November 9th is Kristallnacht. And in 1938, this terrible incident where the Germans torched synagogues, vandalized Jewish homes, schools, and businesses, and killed close to 100 Jews and smashed all the windows, hence the name Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was a change in policy and a change in action. Even though Nazis had come into power much early, with the advent of Kristallnacht, things moved forward at a rapid rate and very much against the Jews. So Kristallnacht is November 9th. Veterans Day is November 11th. And the last Thursday in the month is Thanksgiving. I don't know if we all realize that Thanksgiving Day, we all think of the Pilgrims and the Indians and corn and pumpkins and all these exotic things. But Thanksgiving is also the result of a war, the Civil War. On October 3rd, 1863, President Lincoln signed a proclamation that instituted a National Day of Thanksgiving. And he did this on purpose. Things were terrible. And he wanted people to realize that in the midst of the darkest of times, there were still things to be thankful for. Lincoln wrote, "The year that is drawing towards its close has been filled with blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seen foreign states to invite and provoke their aggression, peace has been preserved with all nations except for our own. No human counsel has devised, and no mortal hand has worked out the great things of our blessings. These are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, hath nevertheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and one voice by the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday in November as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficial Father who dwells in heaven. That's Abraham Lincoln. So we're tempted to ask ourselves what good things can come out of war. And out of the strife of the American Civil War, we have a National Day of Thanksgiving. And that goes a long way towards healing. And out of the strife and the horrors of World War II, we keep discovering more stories of courage, resistance, and bravery. And the story of Varian Fry goes a long way towards our healing as well. So at this time, first I have a commercial. The Jewish Historical Society has two important events coming up. One is a book talk on a visual presentation of Kandinsky, which is going to be right here in the JCC, Wednesday, November 18th at 10. And Dr. Elisa Kaplan will be giving that. Oops, that's me. Okay. And in December, we have a very special program. So bring your telescope, bring your binoculars, and bring your compass, because we have Dr. Ann Peskin, who was sitting at the desk and is now sitting at the back, is going to help us search for Jewish pirates. And that's going to be also here at the JCC on December 6th. So it's my pleasure to introduce two extremely important people, Nancy Schiffman of the Jewish Arts and Film Festival, and Ava Weller, the president of the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. Nancy and Ava.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you as well on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County, located here in Stamford. I want to thank the JCC and the Jewish Arts and Film Festival of Fairfield County and Nancy Schiffman for continuing this wonderful partnership again this year, so that together we can bring excellent programs and films to the Jewish community. Some of you may not know that today's program is personally significant to me, as this week is the yahrzeit of my father's death. And he was a survivor of 5 years in 10 concentration camps and was liberated after a death march at the age of 19. His experience has always had an impact on him and his family, and as the years went by, his main concern was that the Holocaust and its lessons would not be forgotten. I don't know if many of you have seen the Connecticut Magazine article that highlights an article about the former Connecticut Senator Thomas Dowd, who served as this country's executive trial prosecutor at the Nuremberg trial of 1946. And he expressed the same concern that future generations must never forget the inhumanity of the past. Thank you all for being here today to keep the memory alive, and through your interest in remembering a local forgotten hero. It's so nice to be able to really look at the courage and the sacrifices that people made so that others could be saved. So we really appreciate that you're here to share that. We're also grateful to the founders of the JHS who began to collect and preserve Jewish history, first in Stamford and now throughout Fairfield County. My family's history has been erased, but here in Stamford, a dedicated group of volunteers maintains the only Jewish archives in Fairfield County. It holds many treasures, and we welcome donations of memorabilia, artifacts, and photographs. We continue to collect stories and memories about local history through our oral history project, which has been extended to include the theme of Jewish politicians and movers and shakers who've made a difference in our community. The Veterans History Project, part of the National Collection at the Library of Congress, records veterans' oral histories. Please let Alyssa or Marcy know if you're interested in being interviewed or in learning how to interview. We welcome volunteers in all of our areas. JHS just celebrated 30 years in June. We are now planning for the next 30 years, or at least the next 5 years when we reach our 2020 strategic planning goal. Did you know that the Bridgeport Jewish Historical Society is now part of JHS, as is former Norwalk Jewish Historical Society? Everyone is welcome to all our programs, but if you're not a member, I hope that you will join today, and I thank you those who joined today. Please visit our website for any updates, and also please make sure that you sign in so that you can get updates through the mail. The JHS also has a lending library here at the JCC. If you go out the door, you can stop by there. We have books on a wide selection of Jewish topics and DVDs as well. And for those who are interested in the Holocaust, we have an extensive Holocaust collection, as well as reference materials by theme for research on this complicated topic. JHS also holds monthly book talks, usually at the JCC and also in various other locations. I don't know if you know, the Jews have been here since the 1600s, and we have a traveling exhibit that depicts the story of the Jews in our area. We also have materials to help you gather genealogical information, and I would say that we also have engaging programs every 10 months. I'm sorry, every month for 10 months of the year. We have something for everyone. And I just wanted to make sure that we would thank Alyssa and Marcy for coordinating another wonderful program with Nancy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nancy Schiffman. I'm the Associate Executive Director here at the JCC, and it absolutely thrills me that there's a packed house here this afternoon. It's a very important day tomorrow, and to see all of you come out to commemorate, to remember. Remembering is so crucially important to our people. And we have a wonderful way of moving into almost a celebration of this wonderful man, Varian Fry. It's a beautiful story. I know you're going to love hearing what you hear, and you'll be fascinated by the information, and you'll wonder, why didn't I know this before? It's my absolute honor to partner once again. I think it is I can't remember now, you're right, it's either the third or the fourth year that the Jewish Arts and Film Festival, Fairfield County, has partnered with the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County for a very important program commemorating Kristallnacht. And I think it's a fantastic partnership. And I know that I have an extremely, extremely fortunate job. I love my job. Because not only do I get to create programs that I think are vital and impactful and meaningful, but I get to do it with people that I absolutely adore. So I want to thank you, Ava. And where is Marcy Schoenfeld and Elisa Kaplan, who you've heard from before? Where's Marcy? Yeah. Please, a round of applause to Marcy and Elisa. Worked very, very hard to put today together. It was really Marcy's brainchild, and forever in your debt. Thank you. The Jewish Arts and Film Festival, hopefully many of you have attended some of the events. Today is our encore performance. The 9 days of the festival were the 24th through November 1st, and we hope that you came to see some great films, hear some great speakers. We have some art still in the lobby, so on your way out, if you get a chance, take a look. It's called Israeli Impressions. Photographer Paul Margolis, who's an American Jewish photographer, has some impressions of Israel, day-to-day life in black and white, so please take a look. Also, November is Jewish Book Month, so not only do I really encourage you to peruse the Jewish Historical Society library here, our Judaica library, but also if you want to take a look at some titles for sale, please help yourself. With that, I just want to also thank the sponsors, the multiple generous sponsors of the Jewish Arts and Film Festival. Many of you are here today, some of you are not, but it's only with your support that we're able to get this kind of programming together for our community, whether it's films or speakers, and we're really in your debt. We also truly appreciate our patrons. So thank you for coming out today. It tells us that this community is looking for and engaging opportunities to learn, to grow, to commemorate, to come together as a community. So thank you all for being here today. With that, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our guest speakers today. We are blessed with a distinguished historian, Marion Percy. She knows all that you can possibly know about Varian Fry, his life, and those that he knew. So hopefully we're going to have enriching conversation. Please ask questions. I cannot get over the facts and things that this woman retains. We also have the wonderful privilege of having Peter Stein, Fred Stein's son. Fred Stein is a noted photographer who was one of the artists who were saved by Varian Fry. And Peter's going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about his dad's being rescued, and his dad's work. And you will absolutely know exactly who this photographer was by looking at some of his photographs. We're going to save that for you. So with that, I'd love to welcome, a very, very warm welcome to Marion Percy.
Thank you for coming today. I'd like to thank the Historical Society of Fairfield County for inviting me today, and also the JCC. I am delighted to have Peter Stein here to tell you the story of his father and his work. He gives such prestige and respect to what his father did and accomplished. I first heard of Varian Fry on a Sunday when I had nothing to do. And I went to a lecture by Rita Frost of Newtown, Connecticut about America's Oscar Schindler. I'd never heard of any American who'd done any heroics like this. Not only was I intrigued when she asked if anyone would like to help her make his name a household word and help create a bust in Fairfield County, I decided to support her endeavor. Right now, Rita cannot be with us because she has been meeting with the Associate Director of Education and Access at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. They're seeking survivors who Varian and his committee helped, but also not just spreading the word, but getting an exhibit going. Born on October 15th in 1907, Varian Fry was the son of a man who managed a stock brokerage in New York, and his mother was a teacher. But his mother was sickly, and they had her sisters come in to help raise Varian. His grandfather, Charles Frye, was his greatest inspiration. He was the superintendent of the Children's Aid Society in New York, and because Varian was able to accompany him during the summers, he learned from his grandfather about the obligation we have to helping others. As a matter of fact, Charles Frye was one of the people who took orphans from New York City and placed them in homes out west on the orphan trains. And later on, Varian's second wife wrote a textbook for children about that. But that's Charles' story. Varian was an excellent student, and he was very mischievous. He was very manipulative with his aunts, pretty much easy to bend them to his will. Bird watching became a favorite hobby of his when he saved a bird and brought it back to health. And for the rest of his life, he was fascinated with this, often going to Armenia, New York, with Zabet Benedict's family to birdwatch on her father's farm. He went to Hotchkiss here in Connecticut. And because there was a hazing tradition in their junior year of crossing a basement hand over hand holding hot pipes, Varian protested, said this was inhuman, he refused to do it, spoke with the headmaster and said, this is unconscionable and we can't do this anymore. I refuse. And the headmaster did not agree to this, so Varian left. He went to Taft, also here in Connecticut, but decided he was happier at the Riverdale School in New York, where he's now considered a notable alumni. He received at the time the highest scholastic aptitude scores. So Harvard was happy to have him. That's where he majored in the classics and fell in love with Latin, Greek, the arts, literature, poetry. Little did he know, these celebrities of his were going to be part of his life, an important part, and that he would meet them later on. Chagall was a novelist, poet, and translator of plays by Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, Thornton Wilder. He was a German poet who you will hear about in the film that we're going to be presenting to you. He and Varian became good friends. And in 1990, when the Berlin Wall came down, Chagall went to his friend Edzard Reiter, who was president of Mercedes. Mercedes contributed to the redevelopment of whole neighborhoods. And when Chagall asked if he could do something to commemorate Saul's rescue out of gratitude for Varian Fry, a street was named after Varian, and a bus shelter, which contains the story of Varian's life in English and in German. You can see pictures of these on our website. Wanda Landowska was a Polish harpsichordist who lived in Lakeville. She brought the harpsichord back to popularity from its 17th century heyday. Her life was her music. In her biography, there's no mention at all of her escape from Hitler, except to say that she arrived in New York City on December 7, 1941. Varian really understood a genius's absorption in their art, no matter what the venue. And when Wanda played locally, she always made time to visit with him. In Harvard, Lincoln Kirstein was Varian's roommate. They went on to found The Hound and Horn, an arts and literature magazine, in response to a more conservative magazine that already existed on the campus. You might be familiar with Lincoln Kirstein's name. He went on to found the New York City Ballet. Varian was a mischief maker still, and when he put a for sale sign in the yard of the Harvard president, he was expelled. Ever the jokester. His father convinced them to take him back, and he had to repeat it here, but they did accept him back. Kirstein's sister came to visit often with her friend Eileen Hughes, and she and Varian began dating. They were both very civic-minded and were married after he graduated and moved to New York City. She became a teacher, and Varian took a job as editor of The Living Age. This was 1935, and his assignment was to go to Berlin and find out what was going on, investigate the rumors. The night he arrived, the first of the Fürstendamm pogroms began right outside his hotel. He wondered what the commotion was all about, and he went outside, and he saw Jews being dragged from their cars, beaten in the street, civilians standing to the side, not raising a hand to help, and the brown shirts committing all kinds of violence against them. To get away from this abuse, he stepped into a nearby cafe where he saw a man cowering in the corner, his hands on the table, and a German came up and stabbed the man's hand into the table and said, "The day Jewish blood is spilled is a German holiday." Varian was horrified. While he was in Berlin, he also had time to interview Ernst Hofnagel, who was on the propaganda ministry and an intimate of Hitler's at the time. He was also a Harvard graduate, so he gave Varian more time than usual, and Varian took advantage of Hofnagel's indiscretion to say, "What are you doing about the Jewish question?" And Hofnagel detailed the plans of extradition or extermination. The article in the handout is the result of that visit to Berlin. When Varian came home, he did his best to spread the word. He became very involved in the circles of people who were helping refugees. In 1940, you'll see in the film a description of the invasion of France, Hitler's invasion of France. The Armistice Agreement in Article 19 states that any stateless individual must be surrendered on demand. Of course, this means the Jews because they lost their residency and citizenship in their homes. This raised the alarm for these circles in which Varian was working towards the rescue of refugees. And a group was formed called the Emergency Rescue Committee, and they decided that it was time to save the artists, to get the world's artists back to safety. Alfred Barr of the Museum of Modern Art. Paul Hagen ran the German-American Society. His interest was helping labor leaders. The president of Yale, Charles Seymour, and Eleanor Roosevelt helped to write a list of 200 people whose special visas were arranged. This will be discussed in the film after I speak, but Varian, needless to say, ended up in Marseille. He arrived August 15, 1940, and during the 13 months in France, he became acquainted with these artists he adored. Jacques Lipschitz was one of these, a sculptor, who needed to flee France, and with Varian's assistance, he came to the United States. They became lifelong friends, and Jacques eventually settled in Hastings-on-Hudson. I was recently at Pike, the Rockefeller estate, and I thought it was rather serendipitous that the Lipschitz sculpture there is called the Song of Vowels, because I'm a big voracious reader. The Emergency Rescue Committee also had other people on the staff who are heroes. Americans, refugees also, the expats, they are heroes. They're not recognized, some are, but the work that they did, illicit or not, got so many people out because the paperwork was so complicated to arrange. Word spread that an American was there in Marseille with visas, and so the crowds were unmanageable. Charlie Fawcett was one of the Americans who was kept order in the hallway on the lines when people were coming to be interviewed. The interviewing was a very important process because Varian wanted to make sure they were not being infiltrated by any spies. The Gestapo was constantly on the alert for his activities, had files on him and all. But the only American official who would help Varian was Hiram Bingham, another Connecticut hero. He was the deputy consul in France at the time, in Marseille, and he also helped hide refugees and while they waited for their paperwork. The State Department felt the same as they did towards Varian, that we didn't want to get into the war, and so Hiram Bingham was reassigned. Therefore, all of the official aid that Varian had available to him was no longer existing. Europe was the bastion of cultural enlightenment, education, and expression. But World War II changed that because Varian Fry recognized the contributions of the artists and intellectuals his staff saved. New York became a cultural center. And I'd like to read this to you. The point is, art never stopped the war and never got anybody a job. That was never its function. Art cannot change events, but it can change people. It can affect people so that they are changed because people are changed by art. Enriched, ennobled, encouraged, they may then act in a way that will affect the course of events, the way they vote, the way they behave, the way they think. Leonard Bernstein. Marc Chagall refused to leave Europe. Hiram Bingham and Varian Fry went to his home to plead, but with no luck. A few weeks later, Chagall was arrested in a roundup of foreign Jews. His wife Bella called Varian in a panic, and Varian called the authorities, Who do you think you are? This is the world's greatest artist. If anybody finds out you've got him incarcerated, do you know what a fool you look like? You've got to get this man out. And half an hour later, Chagall was returned to his home. He did agree to come to America, and he was very happy to hear that we have cows. Alma Mahler-Werfel was also a person who recognized genius. As a young debutante, she wanted to be a muse. And actually, according to author Andy Marino, she is the model for Klimt's painting The Kiss. In 1940, she was the wife of writer Franz Werfel. They hid in the village of Lourdes while they waited for their paperwork. Grateful for the kind and generous care from the residents there, Franz said that he would write a story about their town. The Song of Bernadette was not only a best-selling novel, the movie won the 1945 Academy Award. Previously, Alma Mahler-Werfel was married to Gustav Mahler. She inherited on his death the original manuscript he was given by his mentor, Anton Bruckner. It was his third symphony. This was regarded as Bruckner's artistic breakthrough, and the signed manuscript was on display in her home when she had her social sell-outs. Hitler wanted it. When Alma and Franz escaped, Varian wanted to accompany them. In a group including Heinrich Mann and his nephew Golo Mann, Varian felt he could take them by train across the Spanish border, but their paperwork was not accepted. Instead, the aging writers had to climb the Pyrenees. Alma Mahler carried the briefcase with Bruckner's manuscript up and over the mountain in her sandals until she reached freedom. It will be explained in the film a bit about visas that the refugees require. It was really complicated. They needed a transit visa to travel in France, an exit visa from France, an entrance visa into Spain, an exit visa from Spain, an entrance visa into Portugal, and then a visa for the ship that they would take to whatever country was accepting them. Imagine a family of 5. Not only did they have to have all of this paperwork in order, there were expiration dates. So you needed to coordinate the date of your visa work. The Villa Herbel is a story within this story. It was a chateau rented by the Emergency Rescue Committee staff because the pressure of all these people constantly waiting and telling their desperate stories was really, the stress was really bringing problems to Varian's health. He was suffering from ulcers, and so some of the staff just took the reins and said, we found a villa half an hour outside of Marseille where you could stay and come back to the office during the day. They were working 18, 20-hour days. He was sleeping in the office, and so people would be coming there. So the Villa Herbel, I encourage you to look it up. The books on display, there are a couple of books in the display case about it. And friends of mine who are on the Varian Fry Association in France, Diane Collin and Alain Guyot, have written a book and have a website about the villa. For me, the best way to describe it briefly is Mary Jane Gold wrote a memoir. She was an American expat who would not leave France and gave money. She was an American heiress and gave money to the refugees. And she lived at the villa as well with the staff and the artists who were waiting for their paperwork, who had no place else to go. She says, living under the same roof with André Breton was indeed an inner voyage of discovery. I was soon introduced to the surrealist games. André placed a large table in the middle of the living room and surrounded it with every available chair. On top, he laid out a half-dozen longish pads of paper, some different colored pencils, and a pair of scissors or two. When I came down that morning, he was holding a few extra pencils in one hand. We're going to play games, he said. My friends are coming and we're going to play surrealist games. I assumed this would be something too recondite and abstruse for me, but he assured me that on the contrary, the games were for everyone. Half an hour later, a tramload of surrealists arrived at the chateau. Oscar Dominguez, Vollner, Wilfredo Lamb, Jacques Harrell, Sylvain Kine, Victor Bronner, André Masson, René Char. I didn't know if they all came the first day, but they all turned up sooner or later. This was a haven for Varian. These are the people he loved so, these artists. So now we're going to have a documentary that will give you a really good overview of what Varian's mission was. And then after that, Peter Stein will tell us about his father's story. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Peter Stein, whose father, Fred Stein, was rescued by Varian Fry and the Emergency Rescue Committee.
That doesn't work. I don't need it. I do? I'm a professor. I give talks all the time. I bet you can hear me. And I'll speak up, but I'll hello?
Yes, good.
See, I'm doing what she did. I like to walk around. It's so great to be here. It's an amazing story, Varian Fry. And obviously, if he didn't save my parents, I wouldn't be here. My children wouldn't be alive. Their future children wouldn't be there. 2,000 other people and their children and their progeny for generations and generations wouldn't be there. So it's an amazing story, and it really needs to be told, and not just among Jewish people, but it's an American story. Varian Fry was not Jewish, and he was just a real human being. My father, Fred Stein, became and is becoming, through my efforts, a very well-known photographer. The problem was that he died very young and wasn't able, when photography started to take off, wasn't able to promote himself like many of his contemporaries. But now his work is in the Museum of Modern Art, the Getty Museum, the Jewish Museum in New York, Jewish Museum in Berlin had a huge retrospective of his in 2013, and we're talking to the Museum of Modern Art in Paris. And, well, let me say, let me just tell you who I'm a cinematographer. I've shot many movies in Hollywood, around the world, for theaters. And then I retired and I've been teaching at New York University for the last 13 years in the graduate film school. What's that? Could you bring it closer? Yeah. Okay. And I just retired. This is my first year not teaching. I've been teaching for the last 13 years. And I'm devoting myself full time to promote my father's work. In fact, next week, in 2 weeks, we're having a big exhibition at the Rosenberg Gallery in New York, which is on 66, just off of Fifth Avenue, a very exclusive gallery. And then I've got, as I said, I've got a few things that I'm working on in Europe right now. But I just wanted to read to you, in conjunction with the exhibition in Berlin, at the Jewish Museum Berlin, and I don't know if you've been there, but the Jewish Museum in Berlin is an amazing, amazing museum. It's the fourth largest tourist attraction in Berlin. It's huge. It's a couple blocks squared. So it was a very important and beautiful exhibition. But this is the book that came out in conjunction with that show. And I just want to read to you the dedication. So the book is dedicated to Marion Fry, an American journalist who was sent to Marseille in 1940 by the Emergency Rescue Committee with $3,000 taped to his leg and a list of 200 artists and intellectuals in danger. He arrived to find the city crowded with countless refugees. Told by the authorities that nothing could be done, he relied instead on his own intelligence and resourcefulness to establish a clandestine escape network, dealing with impossible requirements, official opposition, and the constant threat of arrest. The Vichy government, with the approval of the American State Department, finally forced him to leave France 13 months later. In that short time, he had engineered the escape of over 2,000 refugees, both anonymous and famous, among them Marc Chagall, Hannah Arendt, Max Ernst, André Breton, and Fred and Lilo Stein with their infant daughter, my sister. So, now the Emergency Rescue Committee, which now is the International Rescue Committee, is an amazing organization. It saves, they're very, very involved in Syria and the refugees there, in Darfur, and in Africa, wherever there are refugees, the International Rescue Committee, the IRC, is involved. And in Varian Fry's day, they were just formed, the Emergency Rescue Committee, and there were probably 10 people working there. Now there are over 15,000 people working for the International Rescue Committee all over the world. They're in more than 26 countries, and they are the hope of the refugees. They are the major organization other than the United Nations, and they work hand in glove together to help the refugees wherever they are. And when they get to a country where they place them, they don't just leave them there. They give them an apartment, they give them money, they fill the refrigerator, they get them work. It's truly an amazing organization. And if you look at other organizations like charitable organizations, the International Rescue Committee, for every dollar that they raise, they give 94 cents directly goes to the to helping refugees. So they don't advertise at all, which is why nobody, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the International Rescue Committee, but a lot of people do not know the International Rescue Committee. It's an amazing organization. And last Friday, they had a big dinner at the Waldorf Astoria that I was invited to, where they give out the Freedom Award, which was first given to Willy Brandt many, many years ago, and then has been given to many of the most important people in the world who help and are humanitarians. And last Friday, they gave the Freedom Award, and for the last 3 years and going into the future, the Freedom Award is a photograph by my father, a framed photograph by my father of Albert Einstein, which I'd like to show you. So this is a picture that you will probably recognize. It's my father's iconic picture of Einstein, Fred Stein's most well-known picture. But let me tell you a little about Fred Stein and how he got to Varian Fry. By the way, I should also mention the Holocaust Museum in Washington, when they first opened, they have a permanent exhibition, but their inaugural special exhibition was on Varian Fry. And there were pictures of some of the people that he saved, and 8 of those pictures were by Fred Stein. So, and Varian Fry also in 1967 was given the Legion of Honor by the French government. It was at the embassy in the United States, and my father was there to photograph it and took a very nice picture and pictures of Varian Fry. But let me tell you a little about Fred Stein. So, and he is just one of 2,000 stories. Each one and every one of you has an incredible story. But my father was a photographer, and his story, as any artist, is reflected, their life story is reflected in their art. Fred was born in 1909 in Dresden, Germany. Dresden, a very beautiful city. In fact, I'm sure you know Dresden was firebombed and practically destroyed. Today it's rebuilt, and in fact there was Der Spiegel magazine or newspaper in Germany did a survey, and 85% of the Germans say today that Dresden is their most beautiful city. So he was born in 1909, an amazing city with probably 25 museums, but world-class museums. His father was a rabbi, and he died when Fred was 6 years old. And his mother became a religion teacher. And so many of the people, I just got an email today from somebody who said, who's very old, who said, your grandmother taught me religion when I was a little girl. She's in her late 90s. Anyway, so Fred was very, very intelligent, and he skipped 2 years in the Gymnasium, which is the German high school which leads to college, which is unheard of. And then he went, after college, he went to Leipzig University, which and studied law. He wanted to be a public defender. And he graduated first in his class at Leipzig University in the law school. And the year that he graduated was 1933, which was the year that Hitler came to power. And one of the first rules the laws that Hitler passed was that no Jews were allowed to work for the government. That was one of his first laws. And Fred, in order to be a lawyer, now he had just graduated from school, he needed to work, which was the way that lawyers were given permission by the government to work. You had to, after you passed the bar exam, you had to work for 2 years in the state prosecutor's office, which was a government position. So Hitler had just passed this law. He could never work for the government. He could never be a lawyer. So what he did was he could never be a lawyer and go and work in court. He could never go to court. So he got a job through a friend of his in his friend's father's factory, and he did legal work. He prepared legal briefs, but he couldn't go to the court to testify or to question anybody. So he prepared these legal briefs, and one day his friend said, you've got to leave Germany immediately. Now Fred was very active in anti-Nazi politics. He was a young man. He would go around on his bicycle handing out leaflets against the fascists and giving lectures against Hitler. And his friend said, you have to leave Germany tomorrow. The Gestapo were around. They were asking questions about you. They were asking my father questions about you. And last week they were asking questions about a young woman who disappeared, and they never heard from her again. So my father knew this was serious. So he and my mother, they had just gotten married, and they left Germany the next day. And as they're going to the train to go to Paris, as they're going to the train, there was a big parade. And as you saw in the movie, I don't know if you caught the words, but I've thought many times, it must be so terrible to have to leave your country that you love, that it's your country, and you have to, what they must have been feeling as they were going. And my mother said they were really very miserable until they saw this parade, and they were singing this song, which they mentioned in the movie. It's, "Oh, how wonderful life will be when the blood of the Jews is flowing in the streets." And my mother turned to my father and said, "You know, maybe it's not so bad that we're leaving." Germany was, I was just in Germany last summer, and I get, because I'm working on a museum show, I'm very ambiguous, very, can't come up with the right word, but what's it?
Ambivalent.
Torn's a great word, yeah. I'm torn. But it's very interesting. The young people are very much, that I met, are very embarrassed and very hopeful and very helpful to me as a Jewish American. And I'm very distrustful of the older people. I see someone and I say, "Oh, what were you doing 70 years ago, 5 years ago?" But anyway, so my parents left Germany. They went to France. I don't want to take. I can talk for hours about it, and I'm supposed to speak for 10 minutes. But so they went to France. They bought each other a Leica camera, first Leica camera, as a wedding gift. It was my father's hobby. And in France, they couldn't figure out what to do to make a living. They had gotten a little wedding money, so they were able to get an apartment, which was very rare for refugees, but my mother's family was very wealthy. My father's family was not at all. So they had an apartment, but they had to figure out a life, and they came up with the idea that he would be a photographer. And I won't go through it, but eventually he started to become successful doing portraits. He met many famous people. He was still very active politically against fascism. So he met very, very interesting people who were also politically active. And then in 1939, when it looked like Germany was going to invade France, they took, and it's mentioned in the film, the French government took all enemy aliens. And enemy aliens, if you were Jewish, you were obviously not an enemy. You were obviously not for the Nazis. But they took anybody with a German passport, or that came from Germany, or any of the other countries that Hitler had taken over. So they were now enemy aliens. And they put them into internment camps, which were similar to the camps that we did here in the United States with the Japanese. And they had them all over France, many more than what we had with the Japanese. There were many more refugees in France because France was sort of a haven and for refugees, and they took care of, they allowed them to live. They didn't allow them to work necessarily, but they allowed them to live. You could work if you worked freelance, if you were an artist, a photographer, or a writer, but you couldn't have a regular job. So they put them all in these camps, but these camps were not like the ones that we had for the Japanese, because a lot of them were stadiums with bleachers made out of cement, and there was no bedding, there was no sanitation, people got dysentery, older people and young children died. It was horrible. And then the Nazis do invade France, and they're going to liberate these camps. Well, the Nazis who were in the camps were going to be liberated, and the Jews were going to be sent to Auschwitz. So my father manages to escape, and with a bunch of other people, and he's north of Paris, and he walks to Toulouse. And my mother was not in the camp because I have an older sister, And my sister was born in France, so she was a French citizen. And so they put the father of a French citizen into an internment camp, but they didn't put the mother because the French have a very elevated view of women. And so she was the mother of a French citizen, so she didn't go to. So my mother's in Paris. My father walks from Paris to Toulouse, which is in the free zone. And as I said in the movie, and as you may know, France was split into two zones, occupied by the Germans and the so-called free. It was really collaborationists who were working with Hitler. But it was still, they weren't German soldiers there, or as many, let's say. So it's an interesting story. She had no idea if he was alive or not. He had no idea if she was there. But they had made an arrangement that if we ever get separated, we'll put an ad in the local paper in Paris, and under a pseudonym. His pseudonym was Fritz Berger. And he put an ad in the paper by phone. Fritz Berger is living at, and that's all it said, Fritz Berger is living at this address in Toulouse. And he was actually living with the mayor of Toulouse, who was politically in the same party that he was in. And so she left the next day. And they met in Toulouse and they went to Marseille. And because Marseille was the place, it was on the water. You could try to get a boat. You could go over the Pyrenees into Spain. And he heard about, as the whole refugee community heard about, this American guy, Varian Fry, who has passports. I mean, actually, you had to have a visa in advance. You had to have someone in the United States sign an affidavit saying that they would be financially responsible for you, because they didn't want Americans didn't want people coming in and getting welfare. So my parents never, although they had not a penny, we were never on welfare. So they met Varian Fry, and my father was not one of the original 200 people, but he was on the executive board of in Paris of the Anti-Fascist Journalists Association. And because of that, he was on a list to be arrested by the Gestapo, and because of that, Marion Fry was able to get him out of the country. So, and as they said in the movie, and as Marion said, Varian Fry worked in spite of the American Consul General in Marseille. American Consul General in Marseille and the whole State Department was anti-Semitic. They didn't want a bunch of Jews coming into the United States. But there were a few people, vice consuls, who worked for the consulate. One of them was Harry Bingham, and there's another wonderful person who actually helped my parents, whose name is Miles Standish III. Which is amazing, because I had a show once of my father's work in Greenwich at the beautiful library there. And Miles Standish III's daughter saw the exhibition. And there was a vitrine with my father's exit visa and affidavit in lieu of passport, which was signed by Miles Davis III. And she started crying when she saw when she saw her father's signature on the passport that got my parents out of Marseille and surrounded by all the amazing photographs that my father did. So it was very moving. My final thing, I did want to show you just a few pictures of my father so you can get a little fuller understanding of who he is. But I did now I shot narrative films, stories in Hollywood, for 35 years. But every once in a while I would do a documentary, and I did a documentary once on Varian Fry. And it was a documentary done by Richard Kaplan, who was the director of this film. And we were in Marseille to shoot a dedication of the Place, the place, the square right outside the American consulate in Marseille, and it was being rededicated. And the guest speaker was Felix Rohatyn, who was the head of the MTA in New York, and very important political American. And they were dedicating the place, and it was named Place Varian Fry. And it was so amazing that here was this guy that they engineered to get thrown out of France in 1941, and there we were filming the dedication. So let me thank everybody. I won't go through all the names, and thank you all for coming here and learning about Varian Fry. And let me show you just a few pictures. So here, I know you can hear me. Here are just a few pictures. This is France in the 30s. That's all right, because France in the 30s. So I'll just go through it very quickly. I don't know if you can see in the back at all. What is it? Okay, it's a woman in a cart selling flowers. Where? In Paris. These are all Paris. Paris in the 30s. I'll leave them up here so you can really look at them afterwards. Here's a picture of a little, a refugee girl. She's a refugee, actually she's an orphan from the Spanish Civil War. Many of the people from the Spanish Civil War came into Paris, into France after the war. My father did a whole series of the refugees. So his work is starting to become very well known. Here, if you can't see it, is someone in the Marais district in Paris, which was the Jewish quarter, and she's selling, I'm not even sure, she's selling pretzels. And this is Paris again. And now I brought a few pictures. I have hundreds, but this is New York. So New York in the 40s. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave these over there. I'll leave them out on the stage, and you can certainly look at them. Thank you all very much.
It's all an amazing story, all part of one. When Varian returned to the United States, he had lost 50 pounds and was suffering from vitamin deficiency. He tried to enlist, but he was suffering from ulcers. And eventually he and Elaine were divorced. But they did remain friends, and while she was sick in the hospital with cancer, he read to her every day until she died. He went back to work for the ERC, terribly frustrated because nobody in this country who had no experience in Europe at the time understood the desperation and the urgency. And he found it very difficult to reaccommodate to civilian life. There were no crises to be solved, and the life just didn't seem as purposeful. You'll see on display in front his memoir, Surrender on Demand, written in 1945. And it was not a bestseller, but it was well received, but everybody wanted a happy ending. In 1950, he met Annette Riley, whose father was a professor at Vassar, and they were married, had 3 children, and lived in Ridgefield for 10 years. He was asked to take part in a fundraiser for the IRC for their 25th anniversary. They wanted to put together an art exhibit to raise funds and asked him to go to France to get work, but the artist did not return his calls. He was very anxious and thought he had a heart attack because the work was not forthcoming. Pardon me. They lived in Ridgefield, as I said, and Varian decided to return to his beloved classics, got his accreditation at Fairfield University, and taught in local schools. Still, civilian life was difficult, and eventually he and Annette separated. She moved to New York City with the kids, and he stayed here in Connecticut, visiting them on weekends. At the time, he was teaching at the Joel Barlow School, and one Monday, Annette received a phone call that he had not come to work. He instructed them to immediately call the police, and he was found dead in his bed. He had died of a cerebral hemorrhage while working on an adaptation of Surrender on Demand for high school students, but the police thought it was a work of fiction. Varian is our hero, our American hero. As it said in the movie, he estimated having interviewed 15,000 people over the 13 months he was in Europe, and he defied authority on all fronts to accomplish what he felt was his duty to mankind. There were several posthumous awards, but he's the first American recognized as righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem, and it just so happens that that exhibit Peter was talking about in Washington, D.C., the director of Yad Vashem happened to go and see that exhibit, and that's how he learned about Varian Fry. Recently, I went to see the cutouts of Matisse at MoMA. Matisse was also on the original list, but he would not leave Europe. That room next to the cutout exhibit is for surrealist artists, and it would not have been there, it would not be there now if it were not for Varian Fry, because the majority of exhibits, sculptures, paintings, were by the people on that list who lived at Villa Herbel or other people Varian Fry personally saved. Every single artist in that display was a refugee, considered degenerate by Hitler. And the exhibit contained works by people like Max Ernst, Andre Breton, Marc Chagall. And Otto Meyerhoff was another person saved of note. He was the youngest to have received the Nobel Prize. It was 1922. The Emergency Rescue Committee provided he and his wife the paperwork to come to this country, and Otto Meyerhoff wrote over 400 papers for the Rockefeller Institute. His son Walter had to stay behind because his paperwork was not complete. So he worked for Varian, escorting people over the mountains. He became a professor at Stanford University, and when he retired, he wanted to do something because he always felt grateful to Varian Fry. And so, following the example of Steven Spielberg, he created the Varian Fry Foundation Project /IRC, which was created under the auspices of the International Rescue Committee. Oops, I'm sorry. It was an educational project to make the story of Varian Fry more well-known in this country, particularly high schools and colleges. The foundation made this documentary as well as creating a curriculum for high school and college use, and was given to 35,000 high schools and colleges in this country in the mid-1990s. Why don't we know who Varian Fry is? In closing, again, I will quote my friend Marion D. In her epilogue, she states, "Legendary figures pass before our eyes, monolithic figures onto which we project our dreams. Heroes of flesh and blood are complex creatures, born sometimes to shine brilliantly only for their shortest and finest hour. Varian Fry went to Marseille to his appointed task and fulfilled his mission, not less glorious because it was brief. Let the record speak." Yes, Lester.
Going forward kind of question.
what Warren Christopher said when the tree was planted at Yad Vashem. He actually said, we owe Varian a promise not to forget the horrors that he struggled against. Now, those are all international issues. The International Rescue Committee does help the refugees, but that's not a political position. That's a rescue commission. So I can't really answer your question about why aren't they stopping, but the story of Varian Fry is an inspiration to try to make a difference, and as is obvious, one person can make a difference.
But it's a little frustrating
Oh, yes.
that people really haven't.
Right, right. But you know what? One person at a time can make one person save 2,000 with this committee. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
As a famous Jewish photographer,
I'm sorry.
it's a famous Jewish photographer, who celebrates 2 weeks at the center of Jewish history. And his role consisted of documenting large photographs, especially European Jewry during the 30s. And then he came to the United States. I wonder was his coming to the States was facilitated by Varian Fry, and whether there was any communication and any cooperation with French Stein and
Marion, can you repeat that?
Yeah, the question was, a Jewish photographer named Vishnia took pictures, worked in the 30s, and was he rescued by the ERC, or did he have any connection with Fred Stein? If you'll give me his name and spell it out, I have the archives of the people who were rescued, and I can look that up for you and I'll email it to you. Every time I've met people, they say, well, so-and-so I know was named by Varian, was rescued, and I have found their name. So we can look that up for you. Oh, yes, sir.
I'm very intrigued. The movie was very superficial about the role of Spain in fashion. Kind of said, well, they were impressed with the American seal or whatever. I gotta believe the story is much deeper than that.
Oh, yes, well, it's only a 29-minute documentary. It does, and what I like is that this triggers the interest. The question was that Spain must have had more to do. Well, Spain did have collaboration, but the documentary only touched on it.
No, I'm curious what the real story is.
Oh, the real story. Well, I know Varian Fry's story. I know that Aristide was affected by the collaborationists in Spain. But what I find is the brevity of some of these things, they lead me to research. I've read probably everything online about Varian Fry, every book. And so I encourage you to read the books. Google, good old Google, just Google what was Spain's part in this, because people were able to cross Spain legally. Yes, sir.
It was mentioned before that the International Rescue is now a multi-thousand. What can you tell us about it? How does it operate? How do they raise funds for it? And give us some insights as to how it works.
The question was about insights regarding the International Rescue Committee. What I can tell you is Varian Fry, well actually Albert Einstein, was his concern for the refugees is what began the committee, what motivated the committee that sent Varian Fry. It is very active today. I don't know a lot of the details. I emailed with the president, David Miliband, and he's very, very engaging. But they have a very complete website, a really good web page, Facebook page. And last year, 2014, it was the International Rescue Committee that dropped the ball in Times Square. So they are trying to get out there, but they don't advertise. They're really quite remarkable what they accomplish. Is that it? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you once again, Marion. If you want to speak with her any further, she'll be around for a few minutes. And Peter Stein will be here to talk a little bit more about his dad, if you'd like to go speak with him. We're going to put out some photos. There's absolutely And the Jewish Historical Society and the Jewish Arts and Film Festival of Fairfield County are delighted to have you join us today. Have a wonderful evening.